The NBA world is aghast at the refs. No matter how many rights, it's always the lefts. A more thankless job there is none. In an hour or so, a beautiful podcast we would have done on the hashtag Ball is NBA podcast, your favorite NBA podcast in an Indian accent. We are back at it again with episode 9, and I'm your host Ashwin, and let's get straight to it. This week in the association, Candace Parker schooled Shaq on how modern NBA is played. Blake Griffin agreed to a contract buyout with the Pistons in a rare move which left both parties confused. And our favorite NBA show, Inside the NBA, released their 4-part origin story on TNT. Speaking of dreams, I've got with me, as always, someone who naps busily, someone who tips generously, and someone who speaks judiciously. My co-host, Vineet Devaya. Vineet, welcome back to the pod. I hope the part about the tips is correct.
It's all correct. I'm a very generous tipper. With words and
with words. Oh, not with the money.
Money, though. Money is just something that comes and goes, my friend. It's the words that stay with you.
Absolutely. The good words, very rare to get good words.
Yeah.
We need a lot of talk about refs, man.
Talk about refs.
So we had to get our favorite ref on this podcast for the first time. I think he's talking to an Indian podcast. I hope it's fun for him. So
but we are the only Indian podcast, so this has to be the first Indian podcast he's talking to.
Absolutely. Spoken very correctly. So without further ado, we're going to call our guest on. Our guest tonight is a very special person. He has been an NBA referee for 19 years, calling fouls on Kareem, Magic, Bird, MJ, Isaiah, Ewing, Barkley, Malone, Kobe, Shaq, and Timmy. After that stint, he was the league's director. Yes, Timmy too. After that stint, he was the league's director of officials until 2008, and many other ventures with the NBA, all of which are listed on his Wikipedia. It's beautiful. You should go and definitely read it. Please put your hands together and join me in welcoming the only one, Ronnie Nunn.
All right. Welcome to the Ball is Bay podcast, Ronnie.
Yes, well, glad to be here. Glad to be here, gentlemen.
I mean, like we were speaking before, the reason I'm such a big fan of yours is because I find NBA rules extremely, pragmatic and to the point. And, there's also, they're very precise, but they're also, open to interpretation. And there's a little bit of, you can't, you can sort of, bend it a little bit and all that. There's a lot of interpretation also. And I myself have refed 4 of my college games. So I always felt that, enforcing rules was a lot of fun for me. So I always was very fascinated by how you broke down rules and, how you explained it on the B-Ball Breakdown channel. So huge fan, first of all.
Well, thank you for watching B-Ball Breakdown. I met Coach Nick, who runs B-Ball Breakdown, I think in Las Vegas during one of the NBA summer programs that they have. Mm-hmm. And he came up to me and said, I have a program. Would you like to join me in correcting or helping fans, which I did with NBA TV during my tenure as a director. So I had a familiarity, and I like that because I became a teacher after my university stay. And so when I became a director and I got used to looking at the camera and I was still trying to teach, I got through that, and then it came more naturally to me because it was teaching has always been a calling for me. So it works out. It works out well. And now I'm talking about something that I made a career of, which is officiating. Though I had coached at the college level and played. Oh, wow. So it was one of these things that people don't normally transition to. Mm-hmm. But I was pulled in by a man who kept wanting me to consider it, and I finally did, and the rest is history, as they say.
Awesome. Absolutely. This week, it's been quite tumultuous for the refs. A lot of slander on social media, and Ronnie has done a video with Coach Nick about that Utah game, and they break down some of the correct calls, the incorrect calls, some of the could have gone either way sort of calls, missed travels, all of those sort of things. So you guys should definitely catch that, because we are not going to be talking about specific plays. My first question, first of all, is, Coach, you came on to the league when there was not much social media, right? Like you had your reporters, they would talk more about the game. Maybe refs were not so much in the limelight. Nowadays, you make one wrong move and that's it. Like entire social media rains down upon these refs. They're also young, right? Like they're also in the 30s. They also are on social media, get affected. So can you give us a little insight of does the NBA work with the refs association to like work on their mental health? Because players talk a lot about mental health, and I'm sure refs also, I mean, mental health is there for everyone. So is there some sort of program that the NBA has with respect to referees' mental health?
Well, to my knowledge, I know during my tenure we did not have a lot of sports psychology kind of things. I saw that presented more in the EuroLeague when I began to work with the EuroLeague, and I continue to work with the EuroLeague and the NBL of Australia. But in the NBA, there wasn't a main focus of having a sports psychologist come in and talk. We've had a few people come and talk that way, but it's probably something they should do. I think they do a little bit with it, but I don't know anything officially that they do concerning a sports psychologist. I do think they facilitate issues as they come up and become profound amongst the staff. For example, I recognized a year or two back that there was a greater conflict between players and referees. So when that situation comes about, there's a combination of talk that starts with the officiating end, that also continues with the player end. There was a meeting, I recall, during an All-Star break with the current director, Monty McCutcheon, in trying to press out the wrinkles of this conflict of disagreements. So when you have disagreements, it's a matter of how each side kind of interacts with each other concerning that disagreement. That was something I know that was talked about. I think when it got back to the NBA circles of officials in terms of the preseason camp, that would be an emphasis that they would talk about. This is our procedure we'd like to do. And we've done that before concerning, when is the technical foul issued, in terms of, for example, heat of the moment. Heat of the moment we might not respond as we have done before by giving a quick technical. So
I think the heat of the moment part has become a little too diluted at this point. I remember, you see these clips of Shaq and Barkley are just wrestling and Kareem just like swatting people up, and there was no technical. And now if you just kind of shake your head in kind of like you dunk and you shake your head, you get a technical. So I think these technicals have softened up a little bit from what it used to be during your time, Ronnie.
Well, I think we extended more latitude on technical fouls, and things had to happen more overtly for technical fouls because I think it's either the players that upgraded their style of complaining too often, to where officials now began to give technical fouls very quickly, and then I think it went to engagement and talking. And then there became too much talking and too much engagement, as if we're doing a clinic. And so you have to find a happy medium, and this continues to happen. I think one of the issues that's very important is many of the officials that come to the NBA are not so familiar with the client base of players that are playing. And they need a pathway more of engaging the kind of style of play, the type of player that's coming up, the type of young person today that reacts more quickly. They need to have a familiarity with that, so that when they hear certain things or they notice a certain gesture, not directly to them, they need to bend a little and leave that alone, except when a warning is finally given about too much complaining, an unnecessary gesture, and then all of a sudden you need to respond with obviously the authority that you have to manage the game and manage the people. Why? So they can perform better.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ronnie, I think Ashwin kind of gave a small introduction about who you are and who you have officiated, but you just threw out a couple of things. You said you were a part of the EuroLeague and Australia. So can you just kind of give everybody who's listening a small or a long introduction of your journey as a referee, or your journey with basketball?
How you fell, exactly. How you fell in love with the game, and then
Well, when I was playing international basketball in Mexico after my university time, I got a little ill, and so I stepped off the basketball court, came home, and tried to recuperate. And I was trying out for the NBA on a couple of teams, Denver Rockets of the ABA, which was a profound league at one time, and also I was I actually tried out with the New York Knicks locally. So I had been wanting to always be in the NBA, but then with the illness, I had to regroup because I didn't get well yet. So that was one of the things that were inhibiting me. So while I began to get well a couple of 3 years later, I began to play in a local program called the Pro-Am. And it was an innovation by the then assistant supervisor officials of the NBA, Cecil Watkins. And Cecil Watkins had created a Pro-Am league in every NBA city. And he asked me one time when he first tried to engage me, he said, "What do you think about this league?" I said, "Geez, I knew Cecil from way back, but I didn't know his current position." And I said, "Mr. Watkins," I said, "yeah, it's very competitive. I mean, players like myself that have played overseas, some that have been in the NBA, very competitive." He said, "Well, this league is not for you." I said, "What do you mean?" "It's not for you because you're a player." So I was confused. He said, "This league is created by me for the referees so they can understand modified NBA rules, so they can understand contacts, so they can understand mechanics." And he said, "And I'd like for you to consider being a referee." And wow. So I thought he meant high school. So I said, "Well, I'm coaching at Pace. I'm teaching at a high school in special education. Just not an interest. Maybe I'll continue coaching at Pace and at another school and go the coaching route." But and I said NBA, so I did like this. I put like get back. The demons in the NBA. Which I had failed at primarily, I would say a lack of ability, maybe. And the other was obviously being ill. I couldn't get past the ill part to get through it and try it again. So nevertheless, it was definitely don't talk to me NBA. So after 3 years of dealing with getting my health better, playing in this tournament, he constantly asked me every year. So finally, the final year at 30, I went into the program, and I had excellent tutoring. I refereed early high school in the community. I refereed summer league basketball in the community, especially in hotbed areas like Harlem, New York, that had a lot of basketball, and Brooklyn, where I was born and raised. Yeah. And 4 years later, I was appointed to the NBA. And I don't think because I had some child prodigy ability, they were looking for former players to transition, which doesn't always make a good referee. But nevertheless, I did that. But I really did something that I wish I would have done more in basketball. I had a great focus to see if I could transition. I wish I had, sometimes you focus more at 30 than you do at 20. So, you
wish you had the focus at 20
everywhere. So that's why the world is one community. So and so in doing so, I really focused. And the preparation in that league that was given me with the instruction fast forwarded me that when I tried out 2 years later in front of Darryl Garrettson in California, where the tryout was, they immediately put me in the CBA, the Continental Basketball Association, which is the current G League. It's had various names, CBA, then the D League, then the G League, but they've all done the same. And so I've had some minor league practice there and for 2 years. And 2 years later, at the age of 34, I was entered into the NBA, and actually the number on my back was given me was 34. So that was kind of coincidental. And I began to realize as I started to continue to learn that there's basketball playing, there's basketball coaching, and then there's this remote angle of this triangle, which is officiating. And obviously that's what I'm known for, involved in officiating. And I embrace it as one of the things that many people don't do, many people don't know, and many people don't have the experience of having done it and realizing the teamwork that's involved and the ability of your eyes to not look at the dribbler, but to look at the defender who makes 90% of the fouls.
It's like watching Bruce Bowen all the time.
But that's a quick story of, and I still love it, and I still am very proud to teach what I know and to share it and to make people better, and also to come up with innovative ideas that will help people transition into their work easier.
I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Ronnie joined the league in 1984 as a referee, correct? Which is the Hakeem, Jordan, Barkley, that it was that draft class. So I mean, you come into the NBA and you automatically first of all see Jordan. Like how was that feel? I mean, you have seen a lot of the NBA.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm very thankful, as fate would have it, that I joined the NBA at a time when they had phenomenal basketball playing.
Yes.
Phenomenal basketball players. That's not to say that they don't have phenomenal players today, but the game is a little different. In those days, a post player was a key player in NBA basketball. And every scout and every draft, they were looking for that excellent big man. And I had a number of big men to work with, whether it was Kareem, who I was very happy to have a few years, who I knew back in New York City anyway, who I knew of and been around his company a little. And then, of course, Hakeem Olajuwon and Ewing and Lambeer and Robert Parrish. I mean, you name it. When David Robinson, Tim Duncan, they just kept flowing out of play. I apologize for missing people like the giant Mark Eaton, Shaquille, of course Shaquille. Like I said, Mark Eaton, or Manute Bol, so there was just the word I guess is plethora. There was just a plethora of players, and then all of a sudden you had phenomenal players like Isaiah and Michael and Barkley, unbelievable forward, small forward, power forward, Karl Malone. I mean, they just were. It's a great base for having had that experience. You know, one of the things about basketball officiating is you're always catching up to the player innovations. They create innovations, and you've got to catch up to them because, and of course, cast it against the backdrop of legality or not, whether they're legal in doing these things or not. But they're always doing things that are advantages to themselves, and you've got to pick up and see how does that base legally or not. And and so that's another thing that's wonderful about the game. It's kind of like its own offense and defense. You have your own offense and where you belong, what you're looking for, and then of course your own defense in terms of how to validate what you're doing. You're defending yourself in your decision making. So it's a validation of your own work as you run your game, as you play your game in that mode of officiating. So it's a team. It has things to do. You're responsible for what you should do, and you're responsible for recognizing game after game, play after play, a residue of plays in your head that you're familiar with. So your reactions are habitual and familiar. Yep. And the more you can have that, the easier it is to work.
Coach, so one question I had was, I mean, maybe this is probably most relevant is, there are these marquee games that people always call as the worst referee games. And I don't think you were a part of those, but I think the two kind of very important games that I can think of is the Lakers and the Sacramento Kings game, and also the Dallas Mavericks and the Miami Heat game in the finals. Do you when you're sitting back just go like, oh my God, how bad can they be? Or do you sense that as a player or as a fan when you see bad officiating in key games, or do you see what the officials saw? Like, are you able to kind of distinguish the both?
Well, like anybody, once you get into this business, you begin to have a new perspective on how you look at things. When I look at a game, when we look at a game, we can really recognize how great the game is, especially with the highlighted players, the greater players. But when you're officiating, and sometimes I will look at a game like I used to as a fan, I'll look at another quarter like I used to as a player. It kind of fits in. And then all of a sudden, when I have to get a serious tone about the game, it's when I'm officiating, when I'm noticing the officiating takes my focus off the other two, And now I'm starting to look at what's happening, and it becomes a breakdown. And then I start looking at why it's happening and how it's happening. So when I saw the Sacramento, when I became aware of Sacramento LA Laker issue in terms of going into the finals, I think those two teams were.
Yeah,
I was a referee at that time. So at the mindset of that is, one thing about referees, every morning when you're on the plane and you're looking at USA Today or one of the papers that they sell at the airports, you look at the games and you look at the box score and you look at the technicals and you look at, and you go, wow, they threw out so-and-so, they ejected this guy, there was 5 technicals. And what you say to yourself, it's like a war. It's, boy, I'm glad it's not my game. Yeah. I know now at 645 Fifth Avenue at the office, they are not looking at my game. So that's one thing. Now, when you talk about the Miami Heat and the Dallas series and a play or two at the stretch was at the end, which cost Dallas, I think. I remember
it's considered the worst officiated finals series ever.
Well, I didn't kind of see it as that. I just saw that, sometimes the thing about officiating is different than playing. You could go 0 for 10 in your shots, and on the 11th shot, you could be the game winner, and they will turn all the commentary around and make you the hero. They'll build a hero out of you. Even you've missed all those shots, but look at the great shot he made, the focus that he made to win the game. In the NBA, in terms of officiating, you can have 10 great calls, and then all of a sudden the 11th call or non-call becomes the issue, which ruins the whole game. So it's such a contradiction. But there was a play I remember down the stretch, which the owner, Mark Cuban, was really upset about. And at that time, I was the director. So
okay.
Yeah. So when you're the director, you're watching. It's like having a family. My heart was in it. I don't know if I did as good a job as I would have liked to in terms of teaching and embracing a staff. But I was a guy who knew when I got this job that the competency of our work had to be higher. This I knew. And I also felt I was able to do it because all the things I had done in basketball, including the officiating, not that I was the greatest official at all by any means. I was amongst the best in the league when I was there. I started realizing, what does it take for the whole unit to get better? So, and that came along with the data. The data was coming into play, and officials got nervous about data because they knew this was another criteria by which they were going to be measured. So it was hard to get everybody on the same page to do the things that I knew we could do. In other words, I knew we could raise the data of our abilities and not to be worried about your specific data, just crew-wise work well. So when these things that say this is the worst game ever, this, that, and the other, listen, they come up whether it's in the finals, whether it's in the conference finals, whether it's coming like the complaint about the Utah game the other day with Philly that people say that there's always the worst game ever. There's always that title, but it's really not true. And what you really do see is you start seeing why certain plays are called, or why did you lose the credibility and the believability of TV announcers, the fans, the coaches. So I always say I love to have a game that's worse for everybody on both teams, because when the coaches call or the general managers call in and say, look, this game was terrible. I don't even think it was just terrible for me. I think it was terrible for the other team too. And I go, okay. I can work with that. And by the way, I need to know that. So it's not a problem, because I want to find out why we made these errors. What are we doing to do this? So I always like it when it's evenly upset than when one team looks more disadvantaged in the game according to the calling than the other team, because then I start looking at why. And the usual people will think the why is, well, you don't like Philadelphia, that's why. Your guys don't like Philadelphia. Look at all the technicals that we have. Look at all these game-ending numbers that we lose out on them, and whatever have you. But the bottom line always is that for an official to make good calls promotes him. It promotes him into a status of, instead of being an umpire, he's a referee. Instead of being a referee, he's a crew chief. So there's that internal status. It also says, am I projected for extra monies into the playoffs? So I want to be good enough to get to the first round, then to the second round, then to the third round, and then to the finals. So it is incumbent on every official to want to do well because he makes more money to do well. He's given a status. His reputation begins to build as a quality, dependable person on the game, where you can see a person and say, this guy, no matter where he goes to work, he is embraced and accepted. And they accept his mistakes, which are less than most, because they believe that it was an honest mistake. So it's credibility that goes on with officials, and they try to do that. And that's the key. So a crazy game, worst game ever, that's all just fanfare. We've had enough of them. And by the way, tomorrow or tonight, we'll have another one somewhere. The key is to have less. And I think the other thing is for officials is that when they look at each other and go, this guy's in the finals, I think I should have been there this year, or, or someone who wants to get in the playoff in that same program. I think I should be the crew chief. It also happens about this. Which officials make less mistakes? It's not about the officials not making mistakes. It's about who makes less mistakes. So that's the issue. And sometimes that's political playing, because some people will stand back and not commit to something because they want to make less mistakes. But when you're watching a crew as a team, you're seeing who are proactive people, and you're seeing people who are sometimes, I wouldn't say the word hiding, but are more cautious. And in officiating, you have to be cautious, but you have to be proactive. Right. Show me that you are looking to target things and be part of just converting good decision making.
I mean, you love basketball. That's why you are in the NBA. When does how difficult it is as a ref for you to officiate properly, but then not get influenced by the star that you're refereeing? Like I've seen clips of referees being awestruck just by watching MJ, even when he was in his Washington days, because that's MJ. So especially on the court, you are three people. It's a team there as well, and you guys are also running up and down. There's fatigue is there. You guys are probably running as much as the players, but they get rest. They can get subbed out. You don't have that luxury. Plus, you have to make quick decisions. You have to figure out what is wrong before you have to be in the right positions. All of that is there, and you're seeing Kareem in front of you. You're seeing Hakeem in front of you. You're seeing MJ in front of you. So how does it work? Like, has there been? I mean, honestly, has there been a moment when you be like, let me just watch MJ dunk? Like, I don't care, what else is happening on the court. I've got the best seat in the house.
That's a good expression. Yes, you do have the best seat in the house. And, listen, you got the best seat in the house. You're running with the best horses in the race, so to speak. You're part of the entertainment of an evening in a city, which is it's like whether you're going to the theater or you're going to a basketball game at a big arena, you're part of all of that. I think for me, one of the things that helped me was that I had played basketball with players that were very, very good, and many better than me. So I didn't have the sense of nervousness or just kind of an awestruck feeling when I was working. What was important to me was, do I get my calls and my decisions right? Am I focused on what they're doing? Am I focused to the nature of how certain people play, so I can understand whether they're being fouled or that contact is marginal and it's a play on? So I didn't become as awestruck. I think the issue is, and I think journalists, TV interviewers like yourself and what have you.
Podcast interviewers.
Yeah, podcast. Just as good today.
Absolutely.
I think what happens is when something happens to a star player, meaning from getting hurt to getting called fouls very early on where he's seated, from getting ejected from a game because people come to see these great players, or Michael Jordan, a Kobe Bryant, a Kareem. So I think what happens is, and not a star player should have no advantage than another. In fact, I'll throw this in. Most star players that are complaining about fouls are usually fouled because they play through fouls where we don't whistle. Yeah. We don't whistle them because their ability to convert so much of what they do. If they're known as rebounders, if they're known as good post players, if they're known as scorers and shooters, they are driving to the hoop. Sometimes there's contacts. I've had plays where Michael would go or Kobe would go to the basket, and I'd be there and I'd see something and it didn't look that much. And to me, it was marginal. It was a playthrough. Ball happened to go in the hoop, and they turn around and say, Ronnie, I got hit on that. I got hit on that. Because every player wants to get what he's owed, whether it's the last guy on the team or the top star. But the key to stars is sometimes we miss plays that they deserve to have, instead of people saying they won't call that play on that guy because he's the star. And the bottom line is it goes back to the basics. The basics are people highlight the stars. So when you're out there in a game, you don't think to yourself, okay, this is Charles Barkley. He plays a little rough. He plays a little aggressive. I got to make sure, I don't call everything on him because he's going to sit down. That's not the issue. The issue is this is kind of like a war, and I've got to protect the foxhole that I'm in from people running into me, running over me. So I want to make sure that when I target and I whistle something that you're wrong, then I want to be right, even the more, because they're going to get the highlighted information on next day's headline that they were mistreated, or that 4 of their 6 fouls were incorrect. And that's a problem, because that puts on the officials that made that mistake, because they're star players. It doesn't really work the other way around, where an official does a good job and nobody says anything but, "Yeah, nice. They did a nice job tonight."
It's kind of a thankless job in the end of the day, I guess.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, yes, there are myths out there concerning star players. There are myths out there concerning the number of fouls one team got and the other team didn't get, and who gets into penalty sooner. Coaches come up to you and say, we're getting fouled too, aren't we, in this game? Aren't we? Can it be perfect that they only committed 1 foul in the last 10 minutes, and things of that nature? And I don't mind that, because I want to make sure at the first moment I can speak with the crew is, let us be sure we are not missing anything, because there is an imbalance with the fouls, and yes. And people normally think, but the nature of the game might be different from one team or the other. Yeah. There may be more plays driving to the hole. There may be more players that are looking for fouls while driving to the hole, that they're trying to lure contact, that the contact's not really doing anything. It's the person creating the contact. So there's a lot of little nuances in that, but you have to be aware. And I think the final thing is how you manage the players. They will help you in a way. They will help you stay even keeled in the work if they also respect you and know that you're good at what you do. There's less conflict. I think the issue today is with conflict is that we have many, many new basketball referees. There is a youth program, even though there are guys in their 40s that are working, early 50s. They've come from such a group of officials that are iconic. Even when I entered, or when Joe Crawford or Steve Javie or Danny Crawford or Bennett Salvatore entered this level, there were iconic referees like Earl Strom and Jake O'Donnell and Darryl Garrettson. I think somehow our group carried the baton better than this younger group, because I think this younger group is, I don't know, seemingly more generic or something. I don't know what it is, but that doesn't mean all of them. Yeah, there's always the top ones, and I think it's going to come about better. And don't forget, the players are younger. The game is different.
Faster.
I think, by the way, last comment is the game is easier to ref.
No, yes.
That was one of my questions.
I knew it might be one of your questions. It is easier to ref today because there's not a lot of physical contact post play. There is tricky plays from Harden. You know, there's perimeter basketball going on. There's drives and dishes. There's 3-point shots. Not a lot of. It's like a country game. Out in the country, it's nice and wide open. You've got nice perspective. It's like that. But when I was growing up in the game,
it's all in the paint.
It's all in the paint. It's in the city. It's crowded. It's physical.
Yeah.
You know, there's people getting paid for rebounding. There's people being paid for post play. There's people who are backing down people there. It's physical. Today, it's nice and wide open, similar to a ballet. I mean, God bless them. Stevie Wonder, I think, can referee some of these games today. So, but no matter, no matter what the game is, it's still a heavy weight when you are an official, because even though it's easier, the one play may happen more often that creates a problem because there's less plays to deal with. So that one play is going to stick out more because the game is easier. So you have to always guard against the one play that LeBron does, the one play that somebody does that creates noise. You know, the one play where Draymond Green may get ejected for. It's that one play that sticks out now. And before there were a multiple amount of plays, and the one play would really step out. You know it. But today, only takes one to make it have a problem.
Coach, I have a question. I do agree with you about the 80s. I think the 80s were probably the best era for basketball. Just phenomenal players. And my favorite team of the 80s, Kareem was my favorite player. And I think he's the best player to ever play basketball. I would like to hear some stories, some Kareem stories from you. But before that, I want to talk about my favorite team, which is the Detroit Pistons.
When did they become your favorite team?
In the 80s. In the 80s. Spurs are my favorite team, but in the 80s, the Detroit Pistons are my favorite team. And I don't know if you ever officiated one of the Bad Boy games or any of the playoff games that they were in. Can you talk a little bit more about, one is obviously they were very physical, but I also believe that I've seen some of the full games. They were never always physical. Yes, they had some physical plays, but I think the highlights make them look like they were a little bit more bad boys than they were actual bad boys. Can you talk a little bit more about that era of the Bad Boy Pistons?
Well, you're right about the talent level. They had talent. You know, in the NBA, you can have two great players on a team, and it's not enough. You can get there to the higher levels, but it's hard to win the finals. Yes. I mean, look at Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. I mean, that's how old I am. Jerry West and Elgin Baylor were two great phenoms at LA, but they couldn't win it until Wilt Chamberlain, later on in his career as an older person, completely older, came and said, I'll just come and rebound for you. I won't have to make 100 points. I'll just come. It took one more player to really, galvanize that championship team. The Detroit Pistons were talented at the guard position with Isaiah and Joe Dumars. So very talented. I mean, Isaiah is a very talented player. I'll tell you a little bit more about him. And also, they had a tough front line. They had a guy who created rebounding as a special person. Dennis Rodman opened the gates.
Oh my God!
For rebounders.
So now, good.
Listen, in the NBA, there have always been outstanding rebounders. Every team that was a winning team had an outstanding rebounder all the way through. But Dennis Rodman made it a specialty where people were hiring people just to rebound. I'll give you a quick story. I was in the locker room getting, and it was in San Antonio when he was with San Antonio for a short time, and I was getting my ankle taped by the home trainer, and it was about 5 minutes. So I told one of our guys, handle the captain's meeting. I need to tape this ankle. I don't feel as good. So I run in there, ask the trainer. He says, yeah, Ronnie, no, jump on the table. I'll take care of you in a minute. As I'm in there, Dennis Rodman is on the bike. And so I'm thinking immediately, and I say to him, Dennis, are you okay? Oh, you go, and he's biking. Oh, I'm fine, Ronnie. I'm fine. I said, the game's getting ready to start out there. Are you playing? Oh, Ronnie, I'm playing. I'll be out there. I said, but you haven't even been on a layup line. He said, Ronnie, I don't shoot I don't shoot layups, and I don't shoot shots. I rebound. That's what I do. I said, I get it, Dennis. Don't foul anybody tonight while you rebound. So
I'm sure he did not listen to you.
Dennis was a unique, gifted, and talented man.
Absolutely.
Who had his quirks and had his things. But, you know, when you're good at something in the NBA, people find out what you're good at and they try to break it down. So as tough as Dennis was, there were people trying to, you know, do things to not make Dennis as good as he is. Everything. That has to do with scorers. That has to do with rebounders, post players. If you go left too much, people start saying, all right, let's guard him left so he goes right. But the bottom line is they had him, they had Mark Aguirre, and they had another really tough guy, Rick Mahorn, which people forget about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this bad boy image also developed because the nature of some of their fouling techniques were hard fouls. They were right at the border, what we would many times call today flagrant ones, you know, unnecessary contact. But it didn't come into play at that time until later on when we started seeing that we have to do something about hard fouls. And why was that? I think because the marketing of the game started looking too physical. And people were starting to say, oh, I love the college game. And I love this. And listen, the college game has some great things to it. There's no question. But the NBA game is big-time basketball. And it's tough basketball. But they wanted more fluidity. So, by the way, the Detroit Pistons created a winning type of format with physical play, talented play in terms of shooters and scorers, including Lambeer, who was not particularly a post back down player.
Pop out kind of shooter.
Yes, he created that, and they had, of course, what happens is when people win, the other teams go, how did they win? So what they do is they begin to copycat the winning tone. So now you have in the early 90s, you've got the Knicks with Oakley and Anthony Mason and Patrick Ewing. So now you have this combination of physical play. Pat Riley's coaching. He's working with what he's got, and they go, this is a winning way because Detroit won this way. You know, so instead of the fluidity of the Celtics, who have always had that as their denominator, the running and moving and the good shooting. So that team lost. So now, you know, Detroit is being copied. So I would say that's how things go on. But the game began to become too physical. And that's when these new insertions of the type of physicality that we were not going to allow anymore. And we wanted more freedom of movement, which was a term. And now we see that even in today. As a matter of fact, it's very loosey-goosey today. And I'm wondering, I'm wondering when the defending people are going to start saying, you know, there's no defense.
There's no defense. Coach,
there's no defense.
There's no defense.
I've been around long enough where I see cyclical things. The ABA had the three-point line. They brought that line to the NBA. And what happened was you got a lot of shooting, a lot of distance shooting, but no defense. So trust me, defense is going to come back because the game looks too easy.
Yeah.
And is anybody stopping anybody? So I think those things will come about.
I was just going to say that, you know, Vineet had this point on an earlier podcast that there are a lot of bad teams in the NBA today because none of them give any two hoots about, you know, defense. They're like, okay, they don't have the intensity to, okay, I'm going to stop my man. And most teams are like, okay, you score, we'll score, you'll score, we'll score. There's not much of that, you know, defense. They all try to emulate the Splash Brothers, but they don't shoot like them. They all shoot threes, but they don't shoot like them. And nobody has, let me just go inside, get those 2 points. It's, you know, higher percentage, like that sort of mentality has gone complete. It's so free flowing and so unrestricted that where there should be at least, you know, some help for the defense. And
and I think the point that I was trying to make, Coach, and I think that's what Ashwin is kind of pointing out, is that I was pointing out to the New York Knicks, who are not that great at offensively, but because their defense is decent, they're actually winning games because the rest of the league does not play defense anymore. So defense, like you said, it's cyclical. Is that now slowly defense will become the thing that is going to, you know, kind of give you more of an edge rather than the free-flowing offense, because everybody is now doing the free-flowing offense. So I think you're right. The cyclical thing is going to come back again.
Yeah, and I'm not only saying that as a referee. You know, I kid about it, but you know, obviously I made my mark in the world as a referee. But I'm a fan of the game, and I'm a basketball player too. You know, and a coach. You know, I don't have the extensive experiences in those areas anymore, but I see the game, and that's why I think about defensive-minded the coaches who are going to start saying, you know, if I'm going to trade baskets. You know, this is not new where people say, you know what, I don't have good defense, but I got a great offense. If I can outscore you, I can do that too. I can win that way also. And they're you know, that happens. But what happens is not everybody can score all the time as well as they think. And not everybody can fast break because, you know, some people will say we're going to stop the fast break. I mean, everybody knows in a college game when you go to, I was a college player.
Fast breaks, yeah.
Yeah, you know, you say, hey, listen, this team fast breaks. And what we have to do is stop the break and bring them into a half court, you know, an offense. That'll slow them down. So if you can't stop them, you know, they go on and play their game. So everybody's always trying to interrupt one's game or one team's game. And I think the defensive posturing is going to come back, as you just mentioned, Vineet, on the Knicks, all of a sudden winning some games and recognizing that defense is balancing their approach to winning.
Yeah, okay. We should be a little careful about, you know, praising or, you know, insulting certain teams, because when we talked shit about the Washington Wizards, they went on a 7-3 run. Then when we talked great about the New York Knicks, then they started losing games. And then we talked shit about the Celtics, and then Celtics are on a 4-game unbeaten run. So it's it's like we are always wrong.
It's hard to. I don't know how people, you know, as far as gambling is concerned, which is out here everywhere. I don't know how people can gamble on basketball games at the NBA level. I really, really don't.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I mean, I was never a gambler, even when I was a kid. Now, I grew up in a neighborhood where there were a lot of people that did that, along with other stuff. I'm glad to have come out of that neighborhood in life, but I don't know how you can tell any night, you know, what's going to go on in this current game.
Yes.
In this current game.
So one little controversial question I had to ask. Like, you were director of, you know, officials back when the Donaghy scandal hit the NBA. And I'm sure it caused a lot of strife to you personally, to NBA fans extremely a lot, like, and the NBA brand as a whole, right? Can you take us through, because what I feel is the NBA has done a lot since then to first of all, like, curb this practice, support referees through, you know, their last 2-minute reports, or making sure that teams get fined if they are inappropriate, making sure that, you know, people like you train referees to make them bigger, bringing females into the referee, like making it an all-round holistic development. But when that scandal hit the newspapers, that was, I'm sure it was like a little, you know, painful experience for you as well. Can you talk a little bit about that episode?
Yeah, it's still, you know, it still stays in my craw, as they say, because when it's like I mentioned to you, if you have a group of men and ladies that are with you, and you have a team of people, and then on this chain, and all of a sudden there's this link that breaks, it just kills the chain, and then you can repair it and throw out the link. It was an awful thing to ever have happened. I think it really kind of marred my status. You know, it was bigger than I could ever be. It was big enough for the NBA. They had to make changes. They have to make, you know, my daughter, who's in marketing and public relations, said, Dad, you know, be ready, because it's hard to be in charge of a group where one person in your group has done something so severe. Don't feel bad if they make a change at the end. And it was very hard for me to accept that thinking, because it was coming from my daughter, you know, where I'm supposed to be telling her all these things of life. But you know how that is when you raise young people up well, they end up teaching you later what is happening of that day, like you guys are doing with podcasts and helping me get on the show. But the bottom line is, it made me feel angry. It made me feel sad. It made me question how we could miss some of these subtleties. But the issue was the missing of some of the subtleties of, let's say, plays happened to everybody. they happen. I mean, it's not like, oh my goodness, if you can't see that was a goaltend, there's something going on wrong out here. That ball was well on its way down. And why would a guy not call that? How could that not be called? Then that's suspicious. So the things that were happening every once in a while did not rise to anything. I only remember one incident where Donaghy had made a call from a distance having to do with a block charge where you couldn't see the restricted area line.
Okay.
And it got to me, and I remember having a conversation with him about it. And I knew, because Donaghy's goal was to promote himself. He wanted to become a crew chief. He wanted to have, more rounds in the playoffs. And by the way, he had talent. He definitely was a talented young man who I think could have been a very good official for the NBA. But sometimes officials take on calls to show their strengths or to show that they're engaged. And you would say, whoa, you have to let your partnering official, your colleague, process that play. Those moments come up. And by the way, how could you see the line? I mean, it's not, well, Ronnie, I really thought he was outside the line. It looked easy, and I didn't get an earlier response from the referee there, who, by the way, became a Hall of Famer. And I was saying, we don't need that. Do not do that, because that's not how to show me that you're getting better or that you're engaged or you've got intestinal fortitude, better known as guts, that you have the guts to make a critical call. So when I saw that, I took it as knowing his personality more than finding a theme or a trending of this kind of work. And I think, I have assistants that are supervisors for each group of officials, 15 in a group. So they monitor the games. And I think they were just as surprised. I mean, I don't see every game, but I get info. So they were just as surprised. I think we all were very surprised. And to end the conversation on it, basically, is to say, Donaghy ruined his life, and I think he had a street kind of sense about him that made him tough as a good referee, but also made him stay somewhere in that street mentality from where he launched from. And I had a street mentality from life because it was around me, but not because I embraced it. I had to come out of it. I had good parents to get me to say, you've got to come out of this and become something in life. Then to be careful not to get involved with street things, whether it's gambling, drugs, thievery, gang orientation. I was not going to be part of that. Sports was wonderful for me. Donaghy had those things, but he also liked to flirt, I believe, amongst the old neighborhood folk. And that's where he ended up getting in trouble.
Coach, so I said I'm going to ask you some Kareem questions. So
yeah,
I have a lot of them, but I'm just going to let you talk about kind of how good Kareem was. I mean, we all know he's kind of like one of the best offensive weapons. But I think you saw him probably at the kind of the later stage. Was he? And there's always this debate that who was more important for the Lakers. And I always say it's Kareem because the Lakers were so loaded. Yes, you had Magic, but then you also had the other guys who were extremely, extremely good. So I really have no question as such, but I just wanted you to say good things about Kareem and say how amazing he was. That's what.
Well, I knew of Kareem as a high school player. Obviously, he is 3. When I was a freshman in high school, he was a senior, so he was the talk of the town. And it's actually it was incredible that St. John's, which became the paramount university with winning games in the NC2A, they really wanted Kareem. And it was also, he came from a Catholic high school, Power Memorial. And sometimes many kids that come from parochial schools go to parochial universities. So St. John's was a nationally well-known basketball program at the university, and it would be normal for him to go there and sort of like all of New York to embrace him as theirs, And I think they've always done that. But obviously, he went out to UCLA and a tremendous leader in John Wooden, and he liked to listen. In New York, you got cold weather, you got sleet, you got summers, but and And California, it's California dreaming.
Sunny.
It's California, California breezy, sunny California. So I'm sure that got him out there. The bottom line was, I've watched him for so long be so effective. Remember when he joined the Milwaukee Bucks as a drafted person, he changed the franchise immediately. Yeah. But they couldn't win to the level that they wanted to until Oscar Robertson, an old Oscar Robertson, who was great,
very old,
who joined them. When he joined them, even in his slower physical movements, he was still that effective, to where then they finally won. And then, of course, Milwaukee at that time was a difficult city to enjoy as much, and having come from UCLA, and he ended up going to the Lakers. But I would have to tell you that when I speak to people, because I too believe that if someone would say to me, if you're going to start a team, which player would you have first to start in that team? Which draft player would you draft first? Is it Michael? Is it LeBron? Is it Jerry West? Is it Oscar? Is it this? I would say, in the era that I really kind of understood basketball, it would be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Yes.
Number one.
Finally.
The only other thing that I get from people older than me was, Ronnie, you never really saw a fleet-footed, do-everything person that Wilt Chamberlain did. You never saw him in his heyday. If you look at old films and watch him run up and down the court, see, when we see him win with the 76ers when it was a physical game more. So he's center there. Then we see him say, I'm not going to score. I'm just going to rebound for you and be a good post player. And he wins with the Lakers. But this was at a different time in his career. When you look at him back, he is more fleet-footed than Kareem ever really was. Yeah. But I don't think anyone to this day, when you think about a man who's committed to his game, because I think Wilt, it came so easy for Wilt. He didn't have he just didn't get into it. He was kind of a cool guy in that way. Yeah. But as you know, Kareem is a student. He's a reader. He's a intelligent person about things, no matter what he's talking about. And nobody to this day, which is an amazing thing, nobody to this day has got the incredible patented sky hook that Kareem has. I don't understand why nobody has it. How could you not? Everybody's trying to shoot like Jordan. Everybody's trying to step back like Harden. Everybody's trying to do incredible things like Curry. But no one has got a sky hook that was absolutely unstoppable. And the one thing I remember is Magic Johnson saying, we had this fast break. I forgot what they called it. Showtime. Yes. And we got this showtime. We get it off the board and we're gone, and I'm passing it. But when it breaks down and they stop that fast break, which he said, everybody knows it's number 33 and the ball is thrown.
It goes to the captain.
We got to go to the captain, and I think that's one of the greatest things, because Magic is obviously one of the greatest players of all time. Yeah. A modern day Oscar Robertson, not as good a shooter as Oscar, but I mean, a controlling factor in the game to manage a great team. Even though he had Worthy, even though he had Rambis, even though he had Byron Scott, even though he had Cooper, he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he never forgot that, and that's why they had such great runs. Kareem, to me, is the first guy you got to pick. I guess after that you can argue about Michael Jordan, which I would think has to be next. But there's a lot of stuff. The only person I thought ever followed Michael with the intention of trying to be as great as he, and really had reached that point to a degree, was Kobe. Kobe was the closest thing to mimic Michael. They had the focus of just being a scoring assassin, and they were very hard to beat, plus their natural abilities and so on. But you can start picking people after that, however you want to do it. I mean, there's some great players in the NBA. I mean, Larry Bird is just sort of like the second coming of a Rick Barry.
Rick Barry reference here. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Rick Barry is a great player, but I think he launched a Larry Bird. I mean, Rick Barry was one of the first players that was in control of a team from a point forward. where he had shooters and 1 rebound. I mean, he had some nice players with him, but he was, Jamal Wilkes was a fine player that played the other forward position. Gus Williams was the wizard of the backcourt. I'm with you. You make me happy by allowing me to express all of this passion that I have, and also it gets me above the many mistakes that I've had, in on the basketball court. I've had my fair share of mistakes too. So as a referee, but my joy of the game was, I always tell people I was a baseball player and I loved it. Much easier to maybe make the pros as that. But I told them I left baseball for basketball, and people say, why? I said, because baseball doesn't have any cheerleaders. Basketball. So Kareem is really the greatest of a long time era, really.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you. I just have to say thank you for this. I always argue with all the Jordan fans that Kareem was just the best ever because he did it at all stages, unstoppable. And, obviously everybody loves Jordan. So there's always that constant battle. So,
yeah, there's no way. If you remember when Michael really was playing well and he came into his own, he had to try to beat the Celtics, right, in the East. And he couldn't beat them. I mean, I think he scored 48 one time or something. And, when you have Bird, Bird and McHale and Parrish and Dennis Johnson in the backcourt and Danny Ainge and others that joined that team, when you have that kind of potency, as the Celtics have always been known for over the years, when they had Russell, which is another name I didn't mention, that Bill Russell was another phenom of a defender and player that was in the game as well, that created that whole, he was the core of that team to do those things. Michael could not beat those people on their own, but by the same token, I mean, Kareem couldn't beat certain people without additional help. So I don't want to misconstrue anything, but when Magic Johnson tells me when we really need a basket, we went to Kareem because he had the convertible ability to do that. And Michael can too, but I still have to go with Kareem. So
I mean, Magic may have said that, but he didn't pass him the ball for that 76. I mean, that final against the Celtics. He hit the baby hook himself. So he's like,
yes. And by the way, he loved the baby hook. He loved it. Listen, Magic could play every position, as we know, which is also unique. He had players come. Look at that. Like LeBron today. He's another unique player. Some of the great players, given their youth, could play in any era.
Yeah.
Wilt Chamberlain in his youth could play today.
I mean, come on.
Exactly. Kareem, if he was healthy and well and young,
he could play now.
He could play now. Right.
60-year-old Kareem.
The only person with that kind of phenomenal athletic ability from over the years was Wilt. And like I tell you, one time I think when Wilt was 50 and Muhammad Ali was the champion boxer of all time, Wilt said something to somebody, I might want to try to box at 50. And everybody said, he could do it. He could do anything.
I think there was like a quote where I think I posted it on Instagram also, is that I think
they compare each other's hands. And all.
No. Wilt was given money by, I think, the New Jersey Nets.
Yes, to play at 50.
To play when he was 50 for them.
Yes, there you go. So, we're and this is one time I could be with you. We're all young enough to not have known this about Wilt. We're young. In your case, you weren't born, and in my case, I was too young to really recognize his greatness. But all the others say, "Look, Ronnie, I've seen Kareem. I've seen this Wilt Chamberlain. You had to see him. But everything is relative to the era and things. Yeah. And all I can say is that God bless those that have made us entertained in the ability of sport. I mean, there's just something about sports that say, I put my pants on the same way. I can run in this race right next to this guy. How come he's so much faster than me? What is it that I don't have that? You know, how can he jump so high? How can Michael make such shots? I can't do that, but it's a gift. It's a gift from above, as they say.
Okay, Ronnie, we will end the segment with this thing that we do with our guests. We ask them, questions. It's a choice sort of question. So you can, it's like this or that. Vineet, are you ready for this?
I'm ready for this or that. I'm ready for this or that.
Okay, all right. So which basketball did you like as a fan more? Like, even though you're a referee, I'm going to ask you from your fan's perspective, 80s basketball or 80s NBA or 90s NBA?
Oh, I don't think there was much of a difference, but I guess 80s I was young in the game of refereeing, so I didn't have it as well, in my hand as I had it in the 90s. When I finally got to the finals, I had it in the 90s. So 90s was for me great, but for the 80s was big time basketball. I enjoyed that. I would say 80s over 90s.
Okay. Vineet, you got one?
Yeah, I got one. Which player got more like beaten down, and obviously they got beat, but you couldn't call fouls on? Either was it Michael Jordan or Shaquille? Like, who got hammered more?
Oh, I think Shaquille was. I think Shaquille was. I'll never forget one time there was some discussion about the complaints that were coming out of Orlando at the time before he was a Laker. And of course, if you see him then, he was much slimmer, just like everybody young. And I remember him coming out to the captain's meeting, and as I approached him and shook his hand, he said to me, "Ronnie, I am not going to let them beat me up tonight." And I said, "You're Shaquille, that's not going to happen in this game." So, and I was always like that. I had a conscientiousness about the nature of fouls and big men getting fouled, because thinking that he's bigger, he can withstand a greater hit. That is the concept there. But saying that kind of put the cherry on the cake of what was being murmured around, that he was being hit a little too hard. And I never had a game like that with him. But I can understand people doing that. So that's illegal. I mean, you get hit hard, even though you could withstand it. Somebody's got to pay the penalty. Yeah, either you get a foul, you get a flagrant, or you get thrown out. I'd have no problem with that. So when he said that from a young man that was very respectful and very powerful, and by the way, I think Wilt Chamberlain created the tenor and the comportment style of the biggest, strongest men throughout the basketball career of people. The biggest and strongest men who could have really hurt people. Yeah. I think they all followed Wilt's temperament of how to deal with people less strong than you, because Shaquille O'Neal could have hurt somebody out there.
Oh, he could.
Mark Eaton, as quiet as it's kept, Mark Eaton at about 7'6" or 7'5", not only it wasn't skinny like Manute, he was one powerful guy. I once had a play where Charles Barkley went into him, and Charles Barkley went backwards, and I just said, "This has got to be a block," and I called a block, and I think it was the third foul on Mark early in the game. And as he was coming out, and he said to me, he bent over, really completely bent over to speak to me, and I'm tall at 6'3", and he said, "Ronnie, could you explain to me what I did?" I said, I don't know. I said, I'll take a look at it. He said, "Ronnie, I was just standing there." So I said, "Okay, let me look at it." And I remember going to the locker room, coming out and said, people have got to understand that even though Charles took a heck of, and he's a strong guy.
Charles is a strong guy, yeah.
And he had his momentum, and this happened. So thank goodness for the big men in the league that had some belief system that they were not going to hurt people. And that means that's for many of the big men that we've had. Go ahead. Another question. I apologize.
Yes. My question is it true that refs sometimes make up calls? Like if they had a wrong decision on one side, they go to the other side, they give a wrong decision there as well, just to even things up?
Well, you know what? The answer is no, but I will tell you that there are no makeup calls, but I will tell you that in the earlier periods of time and days, officials did do a kind of a makeup call if there was a really a foul that, for example, that should have been called down one end, and there's real disruption about it not being called. On the other end, there would be very maybe tight on a travel. They go, oh, travel.
Absolutely.
So they would give the ball back. Now this occurred because it was within it didn't come down from the NBA offices that way. It was like a internal thing that officials saw the game in an art form more than in a legalese form. And they would think that they were trying to keep the game honest. It was not. It wasn't about a loss of integrity. It was trying to balance the nature of being fair with people. Yeah, we also thought we missed the call. So, but today, and during my era, that was not the manner of life. So, makeup calls do not exist, but people believe it because it's when something was in the roots, it's hard to pull the roots all out. And know that it's not up in the trunk or the branches of the tree anymore. It's gone.
Okay. Better playmaker, Magic or LeBron?
I would think a Magic, and I think because I don't have the data on this, but I think LeBron is a little bit more careless with with the ball. Sometimes he'll pass it. I think he takes shots that are not necessary at times because I think that's just the nature of today's game. But I think Magic is probably the better playmaker. But I will have to tell you that the next guy that's big and strong like him is LeBron. His mindset is to be a good playmaker, which is a great thing because he can go down and score and want to score anytime he wants to.
Anytime
he can go and do what he wants to do, but he has a real internal sense of managing his team. And I think every once in a while he pops out with some of the things, maybe in today's game, that he thinks he could do and should do. And by the way, he makes conversions and sometimes he doesn't. But Magic would not take bad shots or be much more cautious about managing his team.
Okay. So my standard question for every guest is, who, Kobe Bryant or Tim Duncan, who had a better basketball career?
Oh, wow. You know what? I should be asking you that because I know you have all the stats on it.
No, just from your sense as a fan.
You know what? I have always had a hard time, and I mean this sincerely, with all the respect in the world for Tim Duncan, of trying to understand how really great he was and how he really was the core of that team, even with a great player that joined him in David Robinson. Duncan I think that's a great question that I would love to ask Coach Popovich. What was it about him? I know one thing, my games, as a referee, the teams that are most organized are the teams easiest to ref.
They know exactly what they're going to do.
Now, not only that it's not even knowing what they do. It's that they so easily do what they do they make you an outside piece to this thing. They don't involve you in their work. They every once in a while something pops up or there's a call here and there, and maybe Popovich wants to make sure that he's not being taken advantage of. But basically, the best teams need less officiating to be an issue for them. They will accept the mistakes because they're such a good unified group. So I think no one would have. By the way, that talks about another myth: big city versus small city on slanting the game, right? I mean, Chicago, New York, L.A. Here's a little town in Texas, San Antonio, which has a dominant Mexican American diversity. Group of folk down there. God bless those folks who support the Spurs. And here's a team wins four finals, 4 championships in X amount of years.
Yeah. 9 years.
So Duncan is it's hard to see the majesty of Duncan compared to the flamboyancy of Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
But Tim Duncan was always a gentleman, as was Kobe with me. I cared for them both in terms of enjoying to work with them. You care for people in terms of not protecting them, but enjoying their company. I enjoyed their company. I was always enjoying the company of players, not because I didn't make it, because I was a ref, and it was almost like being in a big phys ed classroom. I wanted everybody in the classroom to be successful to the level of their ability. That's how I went to the court every night. And
so you didn't call Tim. You didn't give a tea to Timmy when you're sitting on the bench laughing, right? You're not there.
Hey, I was the director of officials when I think Joe Crawford was at the epitome of just impulsive behavior. Impulsive behavior. Listen, I take nothing away from Joe Crawford. He has a great passion. He came in the league young. They pushed him along, and because they embraced him, and he became something that was almost uncontrollable. And of course, he went to work. He went to work with himself later on in the years. Even when I refed, I think he saw a sports psychologist about his control issues. But I think Joe's era of that type of person cannot work today in anything. There's a diplomacy factor everywhere today in the world, and in the world of basketball as well. And that's why I think some of the younger people can become too diplomatic and not manage authority or proper policing without taking a billy club out and banging on somebody. And Joe Crawford had that kind of thing. He also got away with it. He also got away with it a lot because he was a highly respected official.
Also, kind of like a character.
Yeah, he's a character of an era. And I think he's learned a lot about that, and that takes nothing away from his officiating. Every official has his own internal issues in terms of play calling and trying to be better and understand. But that's his MO. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer, and rightly so from many, many years of his work. But I think that, remember I talked about mimicking. Referees also copycat other successful referees. And that's what you have to watch out for. Joe's success during his era does not mean that it should be the same success for you, in a different era. You know what I mean? It's like anything else in basketball or in life. Some people are successful because of the era and the situation. But if you do that, it may hurt you completely because that era is done. That era is done. Yeah. You got another this or that?
One last one.
I think the answer was Tim Duncan. So let's go with that.
That's not what he said, but that's not what he said.
You know what? Well, first of all, I probably would say Kobe. I would probably say Kobe. All right, I'll be honest with you. I would probably say Kobe over Duncan, but it's like trying to say Michael over Kareem.
Yeah, that's what makes the question so interesting because it's just.
Anyway, he's gonna edit the pod to make it seem like you said Tim Duncan. So
if you're talking individual talent for an individual show, it's different than saying how does this person make a team better, or who is the foundational cornerstone of a team. It's usually has been the bigs, a big over a unique scoring player. Okay, I apologize. Go ahead, go.
Okay, so my last question is, which one of these things gave you more pleasure? The Mexico Press's North American Player of Decade or coaching pace?
What gave me more pleasure was Mexico. Mexico. My college career, really, if you look at it all together, it was just what I would call, for where I wanted to project myself and where some would project me, was fair. I mean, I had good moments and then not good moments. And just because I didn't understand the game better. It took a foreign country with foreign-speaking people and a wonderful coach in Gustavo Sayante, who was also their Olympic coach, to sit me down 19 games in the first season of 72 games and said, you are either going to be a quarterback or you're going to go home.
Oh, wow.
And he called point guard work quarterback. And I didn't get this to him until around the 19th game, where I would come in the game for about 3 minutes. I'd shoot a shot, and then all of a sudden the horn would ring. I'd look over there, the sound, and I'm coming out of the game. So the Mexico experience, though I incurred hepatitis there, which lingered with me for a while, I would say it was one of the greatest places for me to learn basketball as a player. And it's also one of the greatest things that made me a true candidate for trying out for the NBA at that point after, not my college career, but I had learned so much, and I did make a good stand in both places when I tried out. But again, in Denver, unfortunately, they had already signed their people, and in New York, where there was an opening, my illness came back to affect me. So I got sick in that country, but I embraced the people in that country, and they taught me things about life beyond the basketball court that were humanitarian in nature. And I love the Mexican people, and I learned about 60% of the language. So
that's very useful in New York, though.
Yeah, it's very useful in New York. But like I said, the community of the world today and basketball brings us all together. It's your life is ahead of you. You guys are doing great. You can only imagine the other things you're going to be doing, and it's just so happy that I'm still around to share some things with you and to be part of you. And my heritage and background affords me the sense and experience how unification of people are much more important than the division of them.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have one last question. I don't know. So this question. Obviously, we have run out. We have gone way above our time. But there's this one player that I'm a massive fan of, and I don't hear anybody talk about him. Is Moses Malone, and he was so good. Like his highlight reel is just so dominant. Can you talk a little bit more about Moses Malone? Like, because
shame on me for not mentioning another great '80s center. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have Julius Erving. You have these players over there with him, Charles Barkley, who joins in later on. No one's going anywhere without Moses. No. Mm-hmm. And one of the few that transferred out of high school into the pros. Moses just was super. He was a low key. He was like a Duncan, but even better.
Better. Easy,
he was better because he could score better also. He also created a very interesting way of playing. He would shoot shots that when he was close to the basket, that he didn't get a good look at the shot or the rim. He would shoot shots against the board and then retrieve it and then go back up. That's why he had
rebounds.
A lot of rebounds, more than you normally would see. But I remember one play with Moses when I first came in the league. As a matter of fact, it was one of my first games where I met Julius Erving, and we had played against each other in college. And when we went to the captain's meeting, Julius came out and looked at me, and he said, "Ronnie Nunn?" And I said, "Yeah, Jules." I used to call him Jules, And he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "You're reffing?" I said, "I guess so. Who knew, But later on with that team, Moses gets the ball in the post, and he's turning, and he dribbles in, and he's turning to do a spin move to go for a shot. And a guard comes down and slaps him a little. I'm trying to say, is that hand on the ball or is that wrist, And I'm looking, and somebody else comes by and bumps in. And then finally I said, "No, this is a foul." I call it, and then he goes up, and he's hit a third time, and he dunks it, And I have to wipe it, It's because I called the foul before. And he says to me, "Ronnie, wait," in a way, because he mumbled a lot. So I said, what? He said, "Ronnie, forget those little mosquito touches. Get them when I'm on my way up, so I get the and one." I said, "Okay, Moses, I'll try to contain myself," because he's telling me, "Don't call that. That's nothing to me." One time I gave Moses a technical foul once. He was angry at me for a call. Obviously, I don't remember. I was probably wrong. And he So I give him a technical. And then after the game, my supervisor of officials was there, Darryl Garrettson, who was a great leader for all of us at that era. He said to me, "What did Moses say to you that you gave him a tech?" I said, "Well, he was complaining." He said, "Yeah, I know he was complaining, but what did he say?" "I have to put it down in the report." I said, I don't know what he said because I couldn't understand him. He said, "Well, that's why you don't want to give him a technical foul, because you don't know what he said."
You can't report it.
Yeah, you can't. If you can't put it down and he just mumbled it. I mean, he didn't gesture. He didn't put up a middle finger or something that was really, unsportsmanlike. If you don't know, he said, Moses mumbles. Just leave him alone unless he does something more, because he just has a heat of the moment. That was the first time I thought about being taught later on heat of the moment things that players do, but they evaporate and it goes away very quickly.
Yeah.
So that's my Moses Malone story.
Yeah, I love the guy. I watch his highlights almost like every
I'm so glad you mentioned him. He was wonderful to work with too. And the only thing I could say about officiating and players is the patience they had with my errors. The patience they had with my errors. And I used to tell people, whether it was a Joe Crawford or others, it's not the fact that you've got all your plays right. When you get a play wrong and they turn around and want to go after you, it's because they don't like you. They don't believe in you. They don't feel that you will prosper them on the floor in your honesty and in your decision-making of fairness. I said, I've made more errors than some of the guys, but they would recognize somehow or another that it was an honest mistake. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the problem with sometimes with coaches and players and thinking that this referee is vindictive or things like that. And I think in the older era, before my era, for sure, I think referees tried to manage players without giving technicals. In other words, if you talk a little too much and I'm pissed off with you, here's another foul for you. Here's another foul for you. So I've heard about that, and I used to say, I hope I never see it, especially if I became a director. You are not going to manage people on what they deserve to have. You're going to manage people on the manner in which they comport themselves within the guidelines of good sportsmanship and respect for not only the officials, but respect for themselves also. So that was one of the things that I learned about officiating that I would never have known prior to it.
Awesome. Well, on that good note.
I hope we can cut this up. They could make a show out of it. I don't know, but
we'll figure it out.
We'll do it.
Yeah, you may have to do a part 1 and a part 2. I apologize.
It's our pleasure, listening to your stories and your laughter and all the happiness that you have in sharing these stories. It's our pleasure.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ronnie, for sparing.
And thanks for everything. I'm so glad that I get to speak to somebody about the 80s era, because that's one of my favorite basketball eras ever. So.
Well, I have to tell you, I thank you both. I'm proud of both of you, and I'm so thankful to have a connection with you from so far away. Referees are the least important people in a basketball event until the ball is being thrown up at center court. Then they want to know who the referees are. Who are these guys? And for you to have me and to give me a platform to speak about things of this nature is wonderful. Not only for me as a referee, but for all referees to be able to share things with people, because it's a kind of area that people don't know and deal with very much, Mm-hmm. And I get all of that, and rightly so. We're not stars, but we're part of the picture of the thing, and and you've got to manage that well so people can prosper in what they do, whether it's coaching or playing, or even in having fans enjoy the game. They don't need poor officiating that can ruin the game. But it's seldom. It's very seldom in the NBA because of the training and also from the expectancy level. I mean, this is a full-time job. If you can't do this job right, they're not going to keep you. It's too important. And whenever there's money around, people want to get their money, and they want to get it, the wrong way or the right way. They want their money. So if you're going to manage somebody who earns money, it's a predicament for sure. Money is unfortunately the king, and in this world anyhow.
That's true.
But people like you guys, I appreciate very much. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, Ronnie.
Thank you.
All right, so Ronnie.
All right, audience, please like, share, subscribe, do your thing. Follow us on all your podcast listening platforms. We are there everywhere. Let us know what more you want. Okay, all right, that's it then. Coach, thank you so much, and Vineet, say bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey, bye. Thank you.